I wanted to see the church, I think, in staying fresh and engaging. The church is always supposed to be reforming itself into and conforming itself to the image of Christ. And I think church planting is a really powerful way for us to keep doing that creative process of staying close to Christ Jesus. And also energetically reaching out to make disciples. I actually think church planting is a great way to do both those things that seem opposed, but actually are very much deeply unified.
Yeah. Welcome to the Americus Podcast, where we pursue what it means to become a next level neighbor, creating a place we enjoy with the people we love. Today, I am joined by my friend Jim Barton, which is a rector at the St. John's Anglican Church. Jim, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
All right, so Jim, I've known you for really over the last year, I think, maybe even a little bit more than that. I think our wives knew each other a little bit beforehand with some homeschooling stuff, so we kind of moved into the area, and Jill was looking for some groups and some connections, and I think they met, and then they heard, oh, we're both pastors, and so maybe we should meet and talk, and I believe our first time was actually at Los Vaqueros, or no, La Hacienda, correct?
Yeah, maybe so.
I think so. I think that's where so we kind of just met there and had lunch, and I got a chance to meet you and talk, and I just walked away just really encouraged. I feel like you're a very likable person, Jim, but also just saw your heart for your family, saw your heart for Jesus, saw your heart for the church. And so I was just encouraged by that. So I'm a bit disappointed because in the future of this podcast, we're going to hear that you're actually leaving our city. But we'll talk about that also in just a minute. But no, thank you so much for coming and investing so much. And we're going to talk about that as well. So, but you are not from Americus, correct?
That's right. I'm not.
Okay. All right. So tell me a little bit about where Jim grew up. Tell me a little bit about your family dynamics, and let's get a chance to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah. So I grew up in Roswell, Georgia, which is north of Atlanta. My parents brought me home, to the house that I left from when I went to college. So I had a really stable childhood in that regard, and I've got two older half siblings, and then a younger sister and a younger brother, and so we had a big family, a lot of fun together.
Okay, and what'd your parents do?
My dad was in accounting.
Okay,
and then once I was born, my mom was at home. She was an accountant by trade as well, but she was home my whole childhood.
All right. Okay. Did you also do homeschooling, or you did?
No, I was a public school kid all the way. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. What were you interested in? If I met Jim at 12 years old, what are you doing? Where are you at?
Yeah, I tried to be a well-rounded kid. I really enjoyed sports. I was good at school, and I like doing music as well. So pretty well-rounded.
Now, when you say music, are you talking about instruments, or do you play something?
I play guitar.
Nice.
And as a school kid, I played trombone as well.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Acoustic, electric guitar, both?
More on the acoustic side.
Okay. Like classical?
The
nylon strings?
When I learned, I was doing nylon string, some finger picking type stuff.
Yeah.
But if you see me now, I'm almost never doing that.
Yeah.
I'm usually just kind of strumming along.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so all right, as far as just kind of your personality, were you an introvert, extrovert?
Yeah, I'm a huge introvert.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And just kind of social settings. I mean, what were your friends doing? What were you guys? What was it like just kind of growing up in that area?
Yeah, I would say sports and church were huge. That I spent a lot of time with my friends and kind of in those two settings.
All right. So were you trying to get your friends to stay out of trouble, or were they good friends?
Yeah, they were good friends, and I was a pretty good kid. I didn't like being in trouble. So yeah.
All right. So, you're growing up, you're going through middle school, high school. Where do you see yourself? Are you kind of moving forward? Do you have a direction on what you want to be, what you want to do in life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually felt called into the ministry when I was going through confirmation as a 12-year-old.
Okay.
So it was a very early call for me.
Absolutely.
And I've really always held on to that, through my childhood years, and then I actually wasn't ordained until I was about to be 30. So it's 18 years of kind of preparing.
Yeah. Wow.
that I had. Yeah.
Well, I'm interested on that. So at 12 years old, I mean, there's a lot of things going on. What year is this? I'm trying to figure out. Are you like?
Yeah, I think I was a 7th grader.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But probably.
Maybe
is this when cell phones came out, or this like post internet? I'm trying to figure out kind of where you're at.
Yeah. So I was born in 90. So
okay. All right.
2002, the internet was a thing.
Okay.
I didn't have a cell phone at that time. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, but then you have confirmation. You feel God's calling you into not just ministry as just an everyday person, but a distinct call to be in ministry in a very professional level. Were there certain things that were drawing you? Just obviously the Lord, but were there other things that were drawing you to that? What do you know exactly where you wanted to go and who you wanted to learn from? No,
I mean, there really wasn't much strategy to it. It was just, I felt like that's what God wanted me to do.
Yeah.
And it was just a matter of obedience,
really
and truly.
Yeah.
The denomination that we were a part of at that point, I really thought that that's where we'd end up. We didn't end up there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time I was, I went to a seminary in this tradition and stuff like that. So I was trying to do it by the book, but God had other plans.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. So confirmed, not converted at 12, obviously, but becoming around 30 years old, you became a pastor.
Yeah.
Okay. You got ordained.
All
right. When did marriage come into play? Were you, tell us a little bit about.
Yeah. So I went to Auburn. I was there from 2008 to 2012. Actually, our last Auburn, Alabama game, which was in 2011, I had a roommate who had a girl that he really wanted to take to the Auburn, Alabama game. And she said she would go with him, provided that he could find someone to take her friend. Okay. And Kelsey, my wife, ended up being that friend. So
wow.
I was doing him a solid, taking this girl who was a Bama fan to the Auburn, Alabama game. I really thought I was helping him out. But it turns out, I met my wife.
Wow. Did you guys notice each other pretty quickly at that point? Like or was it more like it just kind of became that?
Yeah, it became that. I realized that I liked her at the end of the day. Auburn got clobbered in this particular game.
Yeah. There's not what you want to talk about, probably.
And then but after that, I realized I wasn't even that mad. And I was like, man, I must kind of like that girl. And so then I think about 6 months later, we started dating or something like that.
Okay.
We saw each other a few more times, and
yeah.
So
what was she kind of on track doing? You're going to become a pastor, try to get in ministry. What was she doing?
She was fixing to graduate with a nursing degree and was moving from Tuscaloosa to Atlanta to start her career as a nurse.
Okay. And so when did you guys decide at that point? Was that when you guys decided to get engaged, or when was that?
Yeah, we got engaged Christmas Day of 2012. So we actually did move, pretty quick from meeting in 2011 to getting engaged at the end of 2012.
Yeah.
And then we got married in August of 2013.
Okay. And where did you get married?
We got married in Birmingham at the church Kelsey grew up in, and then I was going to Duke Divinity at the time, and so we moved up to Durham for our first couple years of marriage, and that was such a fantastic season for us. To be just together, 2 states away from all our family. It caused us to really learn how to depend on each other. And just
I was about to say, I mean, yeah, getting married, still being, still getting your degree, working through all that. I mean, there's definitely some times of joy, and then some times of, all right, how are we going to make it? What we're going to do? Yeah. Or I assume that's, a lot of that dependency. What about children? When did they come into play?
Yeah, we had Jacob, our eldest, in 2015.
Okay.
And then Eva Joyce, our daughter, in 2018, and Luke, our youngest, in 2019.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So how did you come to Americus? What's your story of getting from Duke, right, to Americus? I'd love to hear that part.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I think just in this opening part of the 21st century, there's been a lot of realignment that's kind of occurred in the American church across a number of different denominations. The one that we were a part of at the time, I kind of got caught in the crossfire of that. And so the church that I'd been confirmed in had spent my whole life into that point. I ended up withdrawing from their ordination process kind of right at the end of seminary, which is a tough time to do it. And what that meant for us is that we were more or less homeless. We didn't. I still felt called to ministry. I felt called, and now I had this shiny new MDiv. I felt equipped. But there was no context, no church that we felt that God was definitely calling us to.
Yeah.
And so that kind of leaving kicked off 5 years that we kind of call our wilderness years.
Yeah.
Where we were just kind of wondering and waiting for God to make clear to us where we were supposed to be and who we were supposed to be with and kind of what the plan was going to end up being.
Yeah.
But God was so faithful to us during that time.
I bet. I think that's so. It as a pastor, there are times where maybe some of my friends or even members of the church feel like, well, the pastor has everything together. They got it all figured out. They're listening to the Lord. Everything's going to work out for them. But there are so many times where I'm still asking the question, what are we doing? How are we going to get from this place to the next place? So I think it's really great for people to be able to hear this part of our stories, because there are questions, there are legitimate wrestles, right? With what is the next step? And you always feel like there's a for lack of a better term, another season where you don't know. Like having kids, you get over the diapers and you're like, all right, I finally got used to diapers and now we don't need diapers anymore. What's the next season? And then you kind of learn that. And you're like, oh, well, I finally figured this out. But by that time you figured it out, you're in the next season. And so you're always, you're always trying to figure out what the next step is. And so, I think it's really great for you to have that season, because I think a lot of people need to know that that's a real season for even people that, that some people feel like they have it all together. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that season was like for you and how you guys worked through that.
Well, and one of the things that was so encouraging to me in the midst of that was just seeing how often it occurs to characters in the Bible as well. You think about from Abraham waiting for years and years until the promise actually came to be, to Jacob spending all those years in the service of Laban, and of course Joseph in a prison in Egypt, and Moses spending the middle 40 years of his life just out in the desert. What are we doing? And David also, had his own kind of wilderness period. It's a thing God does for us, I think, to prepare us for the work He has for us further down the road.
Yeah, I definitely think there's obviously that preparation. What did you learn during those years of preparation?
Just to depend on God.
Yeah.
I didn't, I was a history major with an M. I just didn't have a ton of marketable skills, to be honest with you. I like to think I'm a pretty sharp guy, but my resume was not what most people were looking for. But it was so cool. I mean, the different people that I worked for and worked under during that time. I didn't have ministry jobs at all. I sold some insurance. I ended up managing the direct sales for a peach and pecan farm in Middle Georgia.
Okay.
Just cool opportunities that met our needs. We were learning how to live simply.
Yeah, that's right.
But we were also learning that the Lord provides. And, that's I think always what we'll remember most from that season.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, and like you said, you get to carry that on with you, and it's a special moment for you to continue to go back to and say, the Lord was gracious, He was merciful, He was a provider then, He'll be a provider now, kind of thing.
And especially as we kind of enter into a church planting season where we're like raising our hands and saying, yes, we will take on kind of stupid amounts of risk, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and us having that season of like, well, we've seen God do that before, and we're confident he'll do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kelsey, right?
Yeah.
Kelsey, how did she, being a pastor's wife it's a very unique thing. How did she feel about that, even that whole move of getting married and knowing that she's going to be a pastor's wife and then going through this wilderness period and then even getting here to Americus? How did she process a lot of that?
Man, I'm a lucky guy. I mean, she's been so great through all that. And she's always been, I think, real clear that she feels that her calling is to be married to me. You know, she never, I don't think, it's not like she's had a calling to be the pastor's wife.
That's right.
That's
right.
She didn't necessarily want to be the first lady of the church or anything like that. But we're together, and we have each other's back.
It's very, I've tried to read some books on it, but it's almost like it has its own, or at least people perceive it, that it has its own job description expectation of a pastor's wife, but really they're just a wife of a pastor. Yeah. And as a husband, you want to make sure, hey, what are you called to do? How do I help you and serve you in that? Not just, well, like you said, well, you're the first lady, so you have all these job descriptions, expectations, that people put on you. But I want to do a really great job at taking care of her and making sure that she feels that, whatever God's calling her into even to the ministry that she feels capable of doing, she wants to do, right?
That's right. Yeah. And she's a strong believer with a lot of gifts to bring to the table. And so, I want to make sure she can do those things and not get sidetracked into some cookie cutter image that may not fit. Mm-hmm. And we've been really blessed with some of the mentors and role models that she's had. Okay. People that have been really generous with their time and kind of just pouring into her and affirming, kind of her approach in a lot of things. Yeah.
How important is it to have people in your life to support you during wilderness years and even just during times of flourishing?
Yeah. I don't know how you can't do without it. Mm-hmm. And in this season that we're in right now, it's kind of a transition season for us. We're trying to build up partners to have the funding and prayer support and relational support that we need to do a new thing in Tuscaloosa. Mm-hmm. Going through all that, it's just been such a beautiful, wonderful reminder of how many incredible people God has put in our lives over the years who love us, but also love the kingdom of God and want to see it extend and flourish.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about then the journey here. So we talked about a little bit about the
I don't think I've made it to Americus yet.
No, that's great. That's great. So in the wilderness, those years really just being dependent upon the Lord, watching God work in very unique ways for you, confirming all the things. And now, do you get a call? Do you get an email? Like how do you get to Americus?
Yeah. So we found out that we were pregnant with our third, and that I think set off some alarm bells in our heads. We were by this point in our late 20s, and God's been providing for us. The ends are meeting and all that. But what I was doing, it wasn't really clear that there was like a long-term future in that. And at this point, I'd been out of seminary for 4 or 5 years, and still had never really found that home. Mm-hmm. We love the church we were worshiping in, but as there's a certain amount of fit you have to be able to be a member somewhere, and then a whole nother level of fit you need to have to be ordained in that tradition or whatever. and we met that first threshold really well, but not necessarily the second threshold. So we were still waiting and wondering. But I took that Lent when she was pregnant with Luke and just set it aside to pray and fast and seek the Lord's will on my future. Honestly, and at the start of that Lent, my prayer honestly was just like, Lord, I felt called to the ministry since I was a boy, but if that's not your will, like if I was wrong about that, or if something's changed, just show me what I need to do to take care of my family. Do I need to go get some other degree? I mean, that's where my mind was going. And it's so funny. The only thing I heard during that whole Lent was you need to go visit an Anglican church, which was just not on my radar. I mean, I was ready to, ditch everything, honestly, just to be the man that took care of his family. But I guess when I got to that point, God was ready to open the door for us to continue into what He'd had in store for us all along. So we were living in Perry, Georgia at the time.
Okay.
The ACNA is a young province. There's not a ton of ACNA churches in Georgia yet. And so the closest one to us in Perry is actually here in Americus. So we started driving, the little bit over an hour.
That's right.
Just to come check it out and to see, what is this church that God is telling us we need to go visit? It was quickly evident that it was going to be the theological home that we'd been looking for and praying for.
Wow. Wow. All right. So now you're traveling on Sundays, coming down here, checking things out. And you kind of find your home, right? Or your denomination that you feel very comfortable in. How does that transition? So at that point, when you recognize that, did you decide, okay, what would this look like, pursuing ministry and, getting ordained in this? Was that what that was
like? The next conversation. Okay. And John, there's just so many more cool pieces and parts to this. When the first Sunday I visited, we were going to a non-liturgical church at the time, so I totally lost track of what Sunday it was or whatever. But the first Sunday we visited was Pentecost, and so it was this really cool experience of like, oh man, the Holy Spirit is here today, and I'm here today. It just stirred up a lot in my heart, even just knowing that. And then St. John's had actually just concluded they'd brought in a consultant on church revitalization. Okay. And they had just finished kind of going through that with the consultants. And it still kind of raises the hair on the back of my neck. I remember when they showed me a document, it was dated right at the start of the same Lent that I had, spent my time praying for a place. St. John's had started praying for somebody. They'd started praying for whoever was going to be next, for God to send that guy to them. And so it's just such a cool providential confluence of God bringing us in as a huge answer to our prayers, and also an answer to the prayers that St. John had started to lift it up. The man that was my predecessor, Father Jim Parker, was such a great man, such a great shepherd. But by the time we started kind of arriving on the scene, he'd been starting to have some pretty serious health challenges. And he was so good to me in helping me through the ordination process. And he told me very early on, he said, here's how I see this. I want it to be like John 3:30, where, he must become greater and I must become less. Of course, that's a verse about Jesus. Yeah, that's right. I'm not Jesus. Yeah, that's right. but it was such a kind approach from him of, hey, I want to find a way to slowly but surely hand this over to you, because he knew that his time to kind of step away from full-time ministry was coming. Yeah.
Thinking about those, going back to that confirmation of when you prayed and they were looking, and the fact that God is working behind the scenes. It's like he's like behind this curtain, and we're just like, where is he? Where is he? What is he doing? And he is working in people and places that we don't even know exist. How much joy and comfort and what did you learn from that particular experience and these confirmations?
Yeah, it's one of the clearest examples I've had in my life of the Lord just clearly answering a prayer and actually answering multiple prayers with one solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's a reminder to me. I mean, the podcast is about neighboring well and becoming what we call a next level neighbor. And I think even just praying for our city, praying for our neighbors, praying, God, what do you want me to do to be a neighbor in this city? And then recognize that God's going to be working, right? He's working behind the scenes, that we don't always know exactly what this is going to look like and how we do it. But God gives us favor with people because he wants to do something in us and through us, and also in them and through them. And so not only were you an answer for them, but they were an answer for you. I mean, it's just a really great understanding of how God works through these relationships.
And as a pastor, you're always trying to find a way to narrate the church's story kind of back to them so that they can own it and see it and sense it and feel it. And that's been that story of us being brought to St. John's by the hand of God has been such a great way for us to just always be able to say, hey, look, God cares about St. John's. And God, it's not just St. John's. God cares about every church, but there's a real particularity to the sense that we have of God's provision in our congregation's life.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of that revitalization, what were some other things that that you saw now coming into that? Now you're kind of following that tread. You're going to lead that charge. What were some other things that within the city that you guys got a chance to be a part of?
Yeah, I think the people at St. John's had a real heart for making sure they were building a strong bridge to the next generation, and so that was kind of the directive that I felt like I needed to take into account, and so the main ways that we've done that has been trying to build some partnerships with some parachurch ministries, just to be sure we're pouring in. Those can function as pipelines, and really those pipelines work in both directions. It's a pipeline for us to be able to direct our efforts, and then a pipeline to invite people into what we're doing. I think parachurches work best when they're in connection to a kind of a consortium of local churches. Yeah. And so we've tried to do that. A couple of the partnerships we've been real intentional with have been Fellowship of Christian Athletes and InterVarsity. Okay. So those have been two key areas for us. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, like you said, I mean, it's important for the city and the church to function, to know that they exist, right? I mean, I had heard a pastor once say, if your church closed in the city, or if the city, if the officials or the government tried to close your church, and the city said no, that's when you know that you've done a great job and have great favor with the city, because you're trying to reach the city, you're trying to love the city well, and that, if someone tries to take that, they know that you've been fighting for them. And so this idea of going out and reaching and making city impact, obviously for the glory of God, for the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? Not so that your church can get bigger and better and it will look good, but that you actually care, and that extends outside of the four walls of a church on Sunday, where it doesn't become just an event, but it actually becomes a people that are out and about.
Well, one of the things you said there has been so key for us to have to constantly keep on at the top of our minds and learn and relearn is that it's really not for the kingdom, or it's not going to make its maximal impact if we're always thinking about, how can we build up St. John's? I mean, that's actually, that hinders us. What we need to be thinking is, how can we be serving Jesus Christ, or how can we be obeying or how can we be on mission with God, right? And if we'll just do those things, St. John's is going to be faithful and fruitful.
Yeah.
But if we're worried about how can we make St. John's bigger and better, we're going to miss out on a lot of the good things God has in store for us.
Yeah, yeah. So what is that? Yeah, so you talked a little bit about the parachurch ministries and things like that, or para ministries. How are you able to connect with those? I mean, because we're still new, right? You're coming in, you see the plan, you're excited about where you feel like God's calling you and your family. You guys are getting settled here. How do you kind of decide on taking steps forward to be a part of what the city is doing as well?
Yeah, that's the stuff that takes time. In some ways, you can't rush it. I know I have heard from 3 different kind of experts that I respect independently of each other, that particularly in a small town or rural setting, it generally takes about 7 years for a pastor to really be embedded in a community. Unfortunately, we're not going to get that 7 years here. So we've kind of cut ourselves short there. But no, it takes time. And I love kind of the approach that you've articulated of this podcast of getting to know people, because I think that's there's no replacement for that. You have to know and be known in order to call people into the sort of radical obedience to the Bible and to Jesus Christ that we want people to ultimately get to.
Yeah. And I love it. I think one of the next times I got a chance to meet and talk to you was actually at an FCA lunch that I was invited to, that Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and the meal was paid for. I mean, I felt very welcomed coming into that environment. And I think I came maybe 3 or 4 times before I really kind of said, this is something I feel like I can commit to. This is what I feel like God will utilize as I'm also coming in. But I definitely saw, pastors and ministers and people from different churches coming together to try to see what is God going to do, in the city, specifically with, Christian athletes or a particular part of the school system. And so I was very encouraged by that, and just by your leadership in that, trying to get us together, letting us know, hey, whatever you need. And I think that that's very, very important, especially in a day and age where things can become so bipolar. Denominations even can get very bipolar about, hey, this is my territory. Don't do this, don't do that. You can't come here. So what are some passages of scripture, or what are some things about you that you value that cause you not to want to be that guy or that pastor who is territorial?
Well, I've always felt, just from my experience with FCA as a student, that FCA has a lot of advantages for churches to be able to work together. Just the connection with sports. I mean, we just live in a sports crazed part of the world. The connection with schools. I think FCA does a really good job of actually being present in schools. And I know as a student in my high school, I didn't go to the church that had the biggest youth group. And in some ways I felt kind of siloed off from my classmates who were involved at, the cool church, and I was at the not cool church or whatever. But FCA was a way that I could, experience fellowship in Christ with my friends at school, and that always meant so much to me as a high schooler. And so, coming here, that was something I was hoping to be able to build that sort of experience for kids like me. But also in we have a bunch of schools here in Sumter County, and I guess my vision for FCA was always a hope that all the schools would be able to find common ground in FCA, and that any number of churches would be able to kind of pour into that and partner with each other, and feel like a lot of the things that churches have to protect, either doctrinally or in terms of how they structure their worship, that they wouldn't feel the need to I think FCA opens up a space where all that's not necessarily on the table.
Yeah.
I mean, as an Anglican, we have a very particular way that we do our worship on Sunday morning that makes it hard for us to partner with other traditions because of the things that we, the order that we like.
Yeah.
But when it comes to leading a Bible study with athletes on campus, we can work with all sorts of people on that.
Yeah. I've definitely, you can use different terms, and earlier we were talking about kind of the essentials and the non-essentials, kind of, the what's in the middle are what we call the non-negotiables. We cannot move from this. This is doctrinally what we believe, right? And so we can't, it's not healthy to partner with any church or organization that doesn't have those very specific things.
That's right.
That's very important because as a church, we're not just a organization that gives out methods of serving. We actually have a message that we're trying to share. And so that message needs to be as clear as possible, right?
Yes.
And so the message needs to be clear, but the methods can change depending on where we're at in the situation. And so it's very important. And that's why I think, when people even ask me, why can't we partner with all the churches, or why can't we do things like coexisting? And it's because there's certain things in the middle that are what we call essentials or non-negotiables that we cannot budge because this is not about me. It's not about you. It's not what I believe. It's not what you believe. It's what the Bible teaches. And so I have to submit and surrender just as much as you do to the very words of God. And those things can be very clear, but how we do it, there's a little bit of play in the joints, right?
Yep.
And so do you want a piano or do you not, right? Do you want drums? You want not, those kind of things are what we call outside of that, right? And so, but trying to figure out how much can we collaborate together, whether it's a church or a parachurch ministry. I think we should do a better job as churches and pastors to try to figure out how to do that well.
Yeah, so, and I've seen FCA as just a key opportunity to do that collaboration.
Yeah, I agree. I agree a lot, and it's already been helpful to me being a part of those meetings and kind of seeing what God is doing and how churches are working together and funding certain things and making sure things are available for students. And so if you're looking even for a way to connect within the city, within Americus, and saying, hey, I would love to see more churches working together, consider something like investing into FCA because they're making the efforts to do that and they're reaching students. So that's a great thing. But I would still love to talk. We talked a little bit about you coming in and wanting to kind of see a younger generation, right? Not just within your church. I think every church is wanting to make sure they're doing that, right? That they're reaching the next generation. What were some things that you were able to see that were encouraging, but also obstacles to that goal?
Yeah, the obstacles at first, I think, are typically relational, right? That you just have to build up a lot of relational capital really quickly, or just be really patient. Yeah. And for us, it was kind of a both and. I think in a small town in a setting like I inherited at St. John's. A lot of times what you'll see is that church growth will initially take place on the vectors of kind of kinship and friendship. And, people who are already connected to you, well, it turns out they've got a grandson who isn't going anywhere right now, but really he's got some things in his life that are pushing him back into the church. And, if you can just be a human to him and reach out and have a conversation and just share the message that we've been entrusted with about Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. You may find that there's some fruit there. And so those have really been a lot of the opportunities that we've started with. And then it's cool to see how God again will just kind of build out from that. And turns out this guy's got a buddy who's going through something similar and, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. I've, I have like a personal vision statement for my life. And part of it has to deal with the idea of reaching thousands by discipling a few. And so it's the idea of, I want to go further, right? I want to see more people come to know the Lord Jesus, and I want more people to understand the grace of God and the power of God. But I can't reach thousands. Like I personally can't functionally relationally do that, but I can reach a few disciples who want to do the same thing. And you see the multiplication taking place, right? And so being able to create time where you are spending time with maybe just a few people and watching the fruit of that take place, where other people say, hey, I have now received and I believe, and I want to be able to share that with others. And that's kind of the hope, right? Is not for people to come back to you and say, Jim, I found this person. I want you to talk to this person. The hope is that you say, I would love to tell you well enough so that you can articulate it to someone else.
That's right.
So, obviously that's a great benefit to what the idea of making disciples. So,
and the other side of that I think you have done a really good job with is just having a heart for the place that you're in, and always looking for ways to connect to the community that God has placed you in. The people don't just come running looking for you. I mean, you've got to be out there. Yeah. It's like the shepherd. Jesus is the good shepherd. That means he's out there. And that's our calling as well.
Yeah. I love that. Have you, so the other part was just kind of, reaching the next generation, which again is highly relational. And I've been talking with, students, adults, couples, over even the last really 6 months about the difference between transactional relationships, which we're actually accustomed to. And I don't think that we're aware that that's the system that we live in. And so it's the way that we treat one another is very transactional, where I believe that what Jesus has taught us is transformative relationships. Relationships actually transform us, and obviously starts with Him and what He provides for us. But do you kind of see that as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great critique of where we're at as a society right now, and then I certainly think that rings true about Jesus's approach to relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing too is when we're able to kind of put our handrails, get our hands on that, we also have to come with it with empathy, right, with care of like, oh, I understand. Yeah. I'm not coming at you to. I heard this phrase, I think I've said it a few times on the podcast, but you can either make a point or you can make a difference. And so many of us, because we're so transactional, is I'm just going to make a point. I'm just going to put it on Facebook, or I'm just going to tell you how it is, right? I'm going to speak the truth in love. And it's very much like I'm just going to make a point and I can walk away from that. But if I know that that's what you're dealing with, if me having a transformative relationship says, I see where you're at, I would love to help you get from here to there. What do I need to do to be able to do that with you and for you? What do I need? What do I not understand? What are some things that we can do together? And I think that is what people don't know what to do with, because it just feels awkward. I'm not bringing anything to the table, but you still want to have a relationship with me? Yeah. Because I think that's what Jesus has done for us, right? And so I think that's a really great way of us kind of stepping into that, especially into the next generation, is not just pinpointing it, but being able to come with some compassion, right? I mean, that's what we find out, Mark 6, Jesus had compassion on those that were looking for leadership.
Yeah.
He wasn't frustrated with them because they didn't get it. He had compassion for them. So I think it's a great tool for us as really not just as pastors, but as people that are church members, people that are out in the community as well, because we represent, we're part of a church, we represent that church and obviously the body of Christ. And so coming with compassion, I think, is a huge win for any city, honestly. So let's talk a little bit about also just that second piece, going back to just kind of the parachurch and just working and collaborating with other churches. You're about to step into a new church plant. You're looking for collaboration. What are some obstacles that you've run into, whether it's been here or kind of in the next stage of your life as well?
Obstacles to collaborating in the parachurch space. Time, vision, resources, and just getting people's attention.
Yeah.
Those have all been difficult at their own times and in their own ways.
Yeah. That's good.
I for a time I served as president of the Sumter County FCA, but I was always first and foremost the rector of St. John's. And all of us were like that. We all had other roles that came first and took precedence. So it is one of those things where if it's never anybody's first priority, that does kind of limit the upside, I think, or just the trajectory changes from maybe you could have gotten here if everybody was pouring a lot of time into it, and now you're just taking off from a lower angle, and you'll get up there. It just takes a little longer. Yeah, and I think that's pretty normal with these kinds of efforts.
Yeah. So you are transitioning, right? You're moving out.
Yeah.
When did that happen? When did you hear about that? What's kind of the story of that?
Yeah, so church planting is something that's been on my heart for about 10 years.
Okay.
Started to experience a call to church planting as a seminarian, and I wanted to see the church. I think in staying fresh and engaging. The church is always supposed to be reforming itself into and conforming itself to the image of Christ. Yeah. And I think church planting is a really powerful way for us to keep doing that creative process of staying close to Christ Jesus. Yeah. And also energetically reaching out to make disciples. I actually think church planting is a great way to do both those things that seem opposed, but actually are very much deeply unified. Yeah.
That's good.
What we've kind of shared with our vision for what we're doing in Tuscaloosa is we want to have a church that's both rooted and vibrant. Okay. And sadly, that's kind of a niche, right? Yeah. I mean, you have so many churches that are rooted, whether that means they come from a well-established tradition or denomination, or whether that just means they've been there for a long time. But when you step in, you just note a lack of vibrancy, and that can be for any number of reasons. But sometimes it's just an ossification or a bureaucratization that's quenched the spirit over time. And so that's one problem. And then on the other side, sometimes you'll come into a church that's really vibrant, but can perhaps be lacking some rootedness in the scriptures, or just maybe even in the governance, to where it's a little too focused on the guy up front, or whatever the case may be. But we're praying that we can be a church that's both well rooted in the scriptures and vibrant with the life of the Spirit.
Yeah, I love that. Now, for people, for us, church planting is a very common word. And so even coming into Americus and we are planting a church, you kind of just say, well, listen, we're just starting a new church, right? We're establishing a new church that doesn't exist anywhere else. Or it's a part of the tradition that we're in, right? It's a part of us we came from another church plant as well. And so it's just helpful to understand, like, this is why, and people have questions of like, well, why do we need another church? There's 200 churches, there's 300 churches, 500 churches here. Why do we need another church? And so you get a chance to kind of walk through that. I think one of the things that you mentioned that I think is really important is the desire to make disciples is within that context, even of Matthew 28, when Jesus says, "Go ye therefore and make disciples," right? Baptizing them, that's an ordinance of the church. And so in order to baptize someone, you need to have an established church. So what he's saying is go and make disciples that will eventually create churches that they're going to be planted there, right? Yep. And so how do you kind of walk through that story with people of, this is what it is and this is why I feel called to do it? Like when you're casting vision for people that are hearing about your new journey.
Yeah. I mean, my experience has been that people often get it pretty quickly. I mean, we have a need to share the gospel with those who are not connected with it yet.
Yeah.
And what you see if you just look at the studies is that church plants tend to reach people who are not being reached by existing churches. And so if we want to be a disciple-making people, we also need to be a church-planting people.
Yeah.
And we have to be strategic about that.
Yeah, of course.
Where and when and how. But there's always that missional imperative that the church has to be responding to. And I think that typically will include church planting within any given network or regional grouping of churches.
Yeah, that's awesome. So why Tuscaloosa? Why are you going there?
Yeah, that was kind of something that we discerned in partnership with our diocese, which is just our word for our regional network of churches.
Okay.
There's no Anglican presence in Tuscaloosa right now.
Okay.
And with it being an SEC town and also the fifth largest city in Alabama, we just feel like that's a real strategic cultural hub where we want to be in the mix, bringing our distinctives to bear, and we just kind of see what God will do with that over years and decades.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about, you talked about kind of time, money, resources. When you get there, what resources are available? Do you already have kind of a building that you guys are looking at, or are you guys going to start? How are you guys going to work through that?
Yeah, the journey to the building is always kind of at the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah.
I'm not really very worried about that, and I don't know how that'll go. We'll start, I'm sure, in our home, and I think we'll have probably a pretty lengthy odyssey to wherever it is that we ultimately end up. The church is not the building; it's the people.
Yeah,
and so I'm kind of looking forward to that nomadic period. It seems like the church planners that I've talked to. Typically, what I've found is the ones who have been most patient with that in the end are most satisfied with how those prayers were answered.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Do you have any families or people that are going with you or that you're going to meet there that have also heard about this need?
Yeah, so we're kind of in we're calling it a pioneer plant. A lot of people in the church planting world call it a parachute drop. But yeah, there are, I think we've engaged with probably 7 families at this point who've expressed pretty deep interest in an Anglican church in Tuscaloosa. Okay. And we're hoping that's the tip of an iceberg. But that's a strong start that we're feeling pretty good about right now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, the network that I'm a part of, they like the idea of planting with around 40 people. And I think there's some pros to that. I always think there's obviously some cons to that, and one of them is you find yourself trying to minister to 40 people instead of trying to reach the new people, right?
That's right.
And so you're always having this balance of, how do we reach people but also care for people, because the 40 people or the 12 families or whatever, they're not cogs in a machine.
No.
Right? They're just like you. They're disciples of Jesus that need to be discipled. And so they're going to have real issues and they're going to have real struggles, but they're also going to bring a lot of gifts and talents and time and energy to it. And so you want to be able to balance those out and hopefully, again, do the work of evangelists, but also make disciples that can help out with that. So listen, I was a part of a church plant 16 years ago in Albany, started in a home, with a group of 40 people. I left that church 2.5 years ago, super healthy church. I love it. It's grown. It's a healthy church. I tell people all the time, I didn't leave it because I was disgruntled or because I thought I could do it better. I did it because we were healthy. And healthy churches plant healthy churches. And so that was the desire from that. But I also know I've gone from, I'm scrubbing toilets still on Sunday mornings, even now, there's so many little things that need to be done when you're planting a church. And so I just want to give you some just some I've been praying for you. If there's any way that I could help as well, just in this journey. It never gets easy, and I think that's part of the reason is because God's calling you to more dependency upon Him, which is actually a gift.
Yeah,
right? And so what are some things that you have? We're getting a chance to kind of wrap it up too. What are some things that you hope for Americus as you leave Americus? What are some things that you hope to see here in this city?
Yeah,
for us.
You saying you felt like you could leave because you felt like the situation you're in was healthy. That's been such a huge thing for us. I mean, we really wrestled with, could it really be that God is calling us to leave St. John's? And ultimately, what we heard was like, just trust me with this. I brought you here. I can bring, the next person here just as intentionally, and it can be even more fruitful. And so for us, being able to leave, I think as a pastor, you carry, your heart is burdened for your people, right?
Yeah.
And for me, being able or feeling like God wanted us, that we were being called away, it was such a call for us to be able to take that burden that we feel and hand it, not throw it away, but hand it to the Lord and say, no, I really do trust you with this. And it's not because of me that anything's happened anyway. It's by your power. And we know it's going to be your power that sustains St. John's, well after we're all gone. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So how long are you going to be in Americus till Tuscaloosa? What is that transition? Where you guys at?
It'll happen in June.
Okay.
And the transition so far is going just like we'd all prayed for.
Good.
I think it's shaping up to be a really healthy transition, and I'm very excited for St. John's and all that is to come with that.
Yeah. Well, listen, when I moved here, and I even got a chance to hear about your story and hear a little bit about you, I was really encouraged coming in, and so I'm like, all right, Lord, I'm building a relationship with Jim, and you're sending him away, and I'm even at this point of like, all right, I want him to be obedient, but man, like. And so I just want to let you know, I appreciate your time, your investment, even in me, just texting a few times, caring for FCA and helping me to try to get involved in that as well. And I'm going to miss that partnership, that friendship with you as well. And so, but we're definitely praying for you as you guys transition out. But I still have a few, we always do at the very end, kind of what we call rapid fire questions, get a chance to get to know you a little bit more, just on a very basic level, right? Just things that kind of more naturally bent to. And so I'm just going to ask you a few of our rapid fire questions as we wrap it up. But what is your, do you have a favorite book or do you have a favorite author?
Ooh, I guess I'm, contractually obligated to say my favorite book is the Bible, right?
Yeah, that's right.
In Genesis in particular, I love Genesis. But no, I do read a lot. I really enjoy Faulkner novels.
Nice.
I'm a huge Tolkien nerd.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to say other acceptable would have been like C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, those guys.
I really love John Milton and C.S. Lewis, both of whom are Anglicans. So,
yeah, absolutely. You're throwing it out there, right? Thank you. All right, coffee or tea? Do you do any of those, or what's your favorite?
Typically coffee. Though in the afternoon, I may make a tea.
Okay.
So
now, do you put anything in your coffee, or you?
Nah, just
look
straight.
at you.
Yeah.
Look at you. That's awesome. All right. When you go on vacation, do you go to the beach or mountains? What do you?
Yeah. We go to the beach.
Okay.
I'm not sure that would be, if it was up to me, I don't know that's what we do, but we always go to the beach.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I hear you. Are you a dog or a cat person?
We don't have any pets.
Okay.
I've never been just a huge pet guy, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like animals well enough, but yeah.
All right. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird.
Okay. How early are you talking?
Oh, nothing crazy.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I'm
getting up at 3:30. Nothing crazy.
No, no, I'm not. I mean, I'm always out of bed around 6, but yeah.
My son figured out, because we do homeschooling, that, he's got to do it for a certain period of time. Right. Mm-hmm. And so he realized, well, if I get up earlier and I do my schoolwork, then I can be done earlier. And he came up to me like 10 o'clock at night. This was like 2 weeks ago, and said, "Dad, can I get up at 3:30 in the morning?" And I was like, no. I love your self-motivation, man. That discipline sounds awesome. I was like, no, you're not getting up at 3:30. But yeah, very much. He is an early bird kind of guy too. He could get up and move. Are you a sweet or savory kind of guy with your snacks?
I really like them both.
Okay. All right. Do you have a favorite inspirational quote or a motto that you think about a lot?
Yeah, I was kind of geeking out on some hereditary stuff, and there's several different Barton mottos, which is our last name, but fide et fortitudine is one, which just means faith and fortitude, and I really like that.
That's awesome. All right. All right. If you, well, let me ask you this: what's your favorite season? Do you have a favorite season?
Pretty much all of them except winter. I do not like winter.
Yeah. Yep. All right. What's your favorite way to unwind or relax?
Playing guitar by myself is really helpful for me, and other than that, just spending time with Kelsey. Okay,
all right. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I don't know.
Yeah, don't do whatever I'm not supposed to do. That's pretty good advice. Let's see. No, I mean, I guess I could. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
I guess I don't know. To know everything.
Okay, to know everything. Yeah. That would be a good superpower. Yeah. All right. What was the worst job you ever had?
The worst job I ever had.
Mm-hmm. It's not that it's bad. It's just the worst job that you've ever had. It might be a really great job. I don't know.
Yeah. When I was in college, I was working as a kind of a small town youth pastor.
Okay.
And I was a college student. It was in a fraternity. Like I was fine, but they, this particular family thought I probably needed some additional income. Mm-hmm. And so they signed me up to work. They owned this little farmer's market. Okay. Way out. And, but I don't know. I probably could have just turned the job down, but I felt pressure to accept. And so I worked for $5 an hour in this farmer's market.
Wow.
As a college kid. And it was fine, but it was not my idea of a fun summer.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. The last one? What is your favorite tradition or holiday?
Favorite holiday is Easter. Okay. But I really enjoy Thanksgiving with my family. We usually have a big ping pong tournament. And
nice.
That's kind of a fun family tradition we have around a particular holiday.
Okay. Where do you rank within your family?
I mean, there was a season where I was the best, but that season has gone now.
Yeah. That's right.
But I don't know. I can usually make like the Final Four. So
That's great. Well, Jim, again, thank you so much just for your investment here. And I'm excited about where the Lord's leading you. What I'm excited about is that God is still speaking to his people. And you see that through confirmations. You see it through God's favor. And that's what's exciting, because we're not talking about a God of the Bible who is in the past, but he's also in the present, and he's also in the future. And that's what we want to call people into, is that this is a real thing. It's not just something we're making up. It's a real thing. It's impacting us. And because God's present. And so very thankful for your story. Looking forward to kind of seeing how you transition out. And thank you so much for investing into Americus. And just as people are listening and they're asking questions, just know that this is a part right, of everyone's life, of asking good questions and really learning about what it means to be dependent upon the Lord. But also, you can still do that, and you can still be a really good neighbor as you're doing that, right, and asking really hard questions. And so our dependency upon the Lord is also, we need to make sure that we are staying connected with people and loving people well. And so thank you so much for your time. And it's good to see you.
Thanks for having me, John.
All right. Oh, man. Great. That worked, dude. That's awesome. All right, we're going to take a quick picture.